From an agenda standpoint, we're going to be fairly high level today. You know, we probably have a variety in the audience of folks that know about voice already or have experienced voice firsthand. But for today, we're going to stay fairly high level. We're going to talk about what voice is. We're going to talk about the operational benefits that a company implementing voice may experience. And we're also going to touch on the components that go into a voice solution, and specifically the components that go into the Accellos voice solution. Then we'll take a little bit to talk about some of the real-world results. I just selected, 4 customer examples that we'll touch on here. And then there's a variety more from an industry standpoint and customer standpoint available on our website. And we will just be skimming the surface today. I'm going to try to keep the presentation to about 30 minutes so that we don't lose anybody. And as Ashley mentioned, we'll take a couple of questions at the end and then follow up individually on any of the questions that remain. And I do encourage everybody here, the vitechgroup.com in the lower right-hand part of the screen there. If you get a chance, go out there and take a look at some of the video case studies. We'll cover voice today in a presentation format, but I'm a big fan of actually having folks see the presentation or see the voice in action firsthand, and the videos do a good job of showing how voice is actually used in an operation. So first and foremost, what is voice? At its foundation, voice is based on a wireless technology, similar to what you're probably using in your warehouse today if you're picking with RF guns. It's going to operate on the same 802.11 framework that you have in your DC now. With voice, the instructions are going to be sent down from the WMS to a device that's either going to be worn on an operator's belt or mounted to maybe a forklift or a cart. The instructions are going to be sent as data, not as a voice soundbite over the wire. They're going to be sent down as data, and then the device actually translates that data into spoken commands. And those spoken commands are then fed to the user through either a wired or a Bluetooth headset, and the user then listens to those commands and takes action on those commands. They're then going to provide spoken responses to either capture data, validate data, or confirm the action that they did. And the device is actually going to translate that spoken response back into data and then send it back up to the WMS to have the system updated. So that's voice simplistically. From a look, though, kind of a bigger picture, what does it mean to be a voice operator, kind of the day in the life of a VocalEct voice user? Essentially, at the beginning of a shift, the operator is first going to retrieve their headset. And then get a device from the equipment checkout area or a storage cabinet. Many of you may have a similar process in place today if you're picking with RF guns. From a headset standpoint, we recommend assigning that headset to a specific user. This is both from a hygiene standpoint. Many of us don't like to share headsets, but also because the device is going to be smart enough to recognize the last user of that headset and help to speed up that sign-on process. So actually bring down the preferences as far as the speed, the language of the particular user. Once they have their equipment, the operator is then going to log on with a spoken voice pin. As part of that log on, the device is going to, like I mentioned, get all of the information down from the user as far as what volume they prefer, what speed, what language they listen to, etc. And then it's going to take a quick sound check just to measure the ambient noise in the environment so that it can then begin to cancel that out. At that point, they're ready to start working. The operator will then proceed into the function that they're going to be doing that day. And that, picking is going to be our main focus today. It is by far and large the most voice-enabled process out in the world. But there's also additional processes that you may want to look at for voice enablement. We have a variety of customers that are also doing cycle counting, some doing put away, replenishment, audit and inspection applications. So voice isn't just limited to the picking arena. But essentially, the operator is going to be asked for the function they want to do. They'll indicate the picking function in this example, and they're going to proceed to get dialogue and do the task at hand, which we'll go into in a second. At any point during the day, they can also take a break. Just by speaking the word take a break to the device, it'll actually come up, ask for a break type, and then can even help dial in how much indirect time you're spending on the floor, because we can capture that information and then send it back up to the WMS. And the goal there is that we're going to increase the accuracy of the labor metrics that you're tracking today. At the end of the shift, their person is going to do the beginning in reverse. They then proceed to check their device back in, put away their headset, again, to a cubbyhole locker or to an area where it's secured, and then they're going to go home. And if you think about it, every day, as of this year, VocaLect has voice-enabled over 400,000 workers across the globe. So there are over 400,000 people following this process each and every day. So that's big picture on what is voice, big picture on kind of a day in the life, but the actual process that a person is going to encounter. What is the dialogue when I'm actually doing my task? In the dialogue with VocaLect Voice, what we try to do is we're trying to make the dialogue as simple, straightforward, and intuitive as possible. And the goal of doing that is we're trying to minimize the amount of training time it takes to get a new operator up to speed. And we're also trying to maximize the productivity by not giving additional information that's not necessary to perform the task. So for example, let's walk through and let's pretend we're a pallet pick operation. And I need to perform a pick. So the first thing the user is going to hear is they're going to hear aisle 25. So this is where I'm going. This is the aisle that I should now drive to. The operator will then proceed to that aisle. And once there, they're going to say ready, indicating that I am now in that chunk of concrete known as aisle 25. The next thing they're going to hear is where to actually go within that aisle. So they're going to hear the bay or the slot to proceed to. In this example, that's going to be 414. They're going to proceed to that slot, and then they're going to respond back with a check digit. And a check digit can be a variety of things. A check digit can actually be a random number that's printed on the bin location. It can also be perhaps the last 3 digits of a product identifier or UPC. But the purpose of the check digit is it's something the operator speaks back to the device to validate that they are, in fact, in the correct location or holding the correct product. So again, I hear location. Proceed to that location, I speak the check digit. I'm then going to hear a quantity to pick. It's going to tell me pick 2. And the operator is actually going to perform that pick, and they're going to respond back by saying 2 to indicate that I did, in fact, pick those 2. And then now, depending on the flow, it may tell you to put it to a certain carton or a certain pallet, but you get the idea that it's essentially a very simple and straightforward dialogue. I'm going to be told the task to do, and then I'm going to confirm that task back. So that gives you kind of an introduction of kind of what voice is. We're dealing with, very simple, intuitive commands sent down from a WMS, fed through an operator's headset, operators speaking back and performing those commands. So why do companies look at voice? There's a variety of reasons. Any company looks at any new fulfillment technology, but in particular for voice, we're going to look at 5 key areas that voice can provide benefits to an operation. And that's both from a productivity and more importantly, just driving savings to the bottom line. The 2 biggest and the ones you'll probably hear about the most if you do some research into voice is productivity and accuracy. And I'll go into depth in those in a second here. But there are additional elements that people sometimes are either surprised by or what I would call unintended benefits of voice. One of the big ones is reduction in training time. And voice is able to reduce that amount of training time you're going to take to get a new worker up to speed because we're going to utilize the most natural form of communication that every single one of us has been training on since birth. We're going to leverage the very simple, straightforward dialogue of walking the user through step by actually speaking to them through the headset, and the user is going to be speaking back to confirm that. If at any point the user gets confused, they can simply say help. And by saying help, the device will actually come on board and walk them through what they're supposed to be doing at that particular step. They can also say the word say again at any point to have the device repeat the last thing it said. In addition, a variety of additional functions can be called out to get information such as how many more picks do I have? What's the description of this item, etc. For the majority of our customers, they're going to see that reduction in training time. Sometimes it's very, very significant. I have customers out there that have taken the training time to get a new user up to speed from days down to just a matter of hours. Many of them will tell you that it takes longer to teach a person how to walk the warehouse than it does to actually train them on the system they'll be using. In addition to training time, though, safety is another key area I think that is an intended or unintended benefit of voice. Our customers will see that improvement in safety mainly because we're increasing the focus of the user. We're going to put their eyes on where they're going. And we're going to, instead of them looking down and reading or typing on a screen or a pick sheet, they're going to be focused on the task at hand. Many of you may hear, maybe even today saw a news article about an auto accident that occurred because somebody was distracted because they were texting on their phone while they're driving. Well, the same exact concept applies in a warehouse. We're trying to keep the eyes on where you're going and focused on the task at hand. Overall, the main focus of all of these areas is that we're going to achieve a quick ROI. We're going to give that payback usually within a year to the customer to justify the system. So let's talk specifically about the two big hitters, though, and that is productivity and accuracy. And we'll tackle productivity first. From a voice standpoint, what productivity means is, we're essentially going to increase your throughput. We're going to do more with less. We're going to do so because we're going to allow you to take advantage of two of the most underutilized resources in your warehouse, and that's the ears and the mouth of your workforce. We're going to increase productivity simply by freeing up their hands and their eyes and allowing them to concentrate on the task at hand. And what we're going to do is we're going to take out any interruptions within the task at hand, which could include interacting with the keyboard, interacting with a printed pick list, interacting with extinguishing a light in a pick-to-light operation, or scanning a product in a scanner operation. Removing that interruption is the key to how we're going to make them faster with voice. What you see on the screen here in front of you are the individual steps along the top part of the slide that a person may be performing today, especially in this example. This is a wave pick or a pick-to-carton operation. And what you're going to see is that in an RF world, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scanner. I'm going to scan a carton label or a pick sheet, perhaps, to say what I'm going to be working on. Then I'm going to look at that screen, and I'm going to be looking at the screen to see where I'm going. I'll then proceed to set the device down if it's a handheld, and then I'll travel to that location. With voice, we may still need to identify the work that we're working on by speaking the last few digits of a work ID or an order number, but then I'm instantly going to hear the location that I'm going to as I'm traveling. If I need to hear it again, I'll simply say again, but I'm going to get that person traveling a little bit faster. Once I'm actually at the location, then I'm actually going to be performing a task. In that instance, with an RF device, the first thing you're going to do is, if it's a handheld, again, pick up that device that you put down to start driving. You're then going to proceed to scan the product or scan a location to validate you're there. Then you're going to stop and look down at that screen, and that's going to be to read the quantity you're going to pick or maybe the carton you're putting it into. And then again, you're going to put that device down if it's a handheld. You're then going to perform that task. You're going to pick that quantity. Now, if you put your headset on and you walk through that same step in the voice world, what's going to happen is I'm traveling to that location. As I'm approaching the location, I'm reaching my hands into the bin or approaching the pallet spot, I'm going to speak the check digit. The device is instantly then going to tell me how many I need to grab, again, as I'm reaching into that location. And I'm going to confirm back the quantity that I'm grabbing as I'm actually picking the product and turning to my pallet to put it into the carton or onto the pallet. That is the benefit of voice, is that we're actually letting the person do the data validation and letting the person hear the instructions while they're still actually performing a value-add task. We're eliminating the white space or the arrows that you see on this slide. We're basically introducing the concept of continuous motion. The person is always going to be doing a task instead of stopping to actually do their data validation or data entry. Typically on the productivity side, from an ergonomic standpoint, with the hands-free, eyes-free concept, customers will report back a 10 to 25% gain. And I know that's a big swing. Usually the big swing is caused by just how much travel time may be involved in the picking operation, simply because we can get you walking faster, and once you're there, we can make you faster at performing the task. However, the actual travel time is still going to remain fairly constant. So depending on how much travel time you have, you'll see usually a 10 to 25% gain. Some customers report back even higher results. Oftentimes, though, those are coupled with an additional process improvement that we may stumble upon during our voice analysis. So outside of productivity though, the second big hitter is accuracy. And accuracy is one that sometimes can be a little bit confusing to understand how voice can be more accurate than RF. And prior to coming on board with voice, I had implemented RF for a number of years. And the first time I heard about voice, I kind of laughed at the idea that voice could be more accurate than actually scanning a barcode on a product that I had. But the key is to understand where the errors are occurring. With RF, you're very, very accurate with RF scanning. You're going to be scanning a location, or you're going to be scanning an item, and I can, beyond the shadow of a doubt, ensure that you are in fact holding the correct item or standing at the correct location. However, that's not where the error occurs with RF. With RF, what's going to happen is the person will scan the correct item or they'll scan the correct location. But then they actually have to perform a task. And to do that, they may look down at the screen to see what quantity they need to grab, or they may put the device down. At that point, I've lost eye contact with the pick bin or with the pick location. So now I may look back up from that screen, especially in a dense picking environment like a flow rack, and I may reach into the neighboring location to grab the quantity. So now I've introduced the opportunity to create an error because I've lost focus, I've lost eye contact with that pick bin. Additionally, with RF, what we'll see a lot of times is that on paper it looks perfect. But if you actually go out there and watch an RF picker, especially let's say in a cart pick environment, where they're picking multiple orders at once, what you'll see is that they'll read from the gun how many they need to grab. Then they'll put the gun down, and they'll grab the product, and they may throw it in the carton they're supposed to put it into, finish that actual task, and then pick the gun back up, and then they will actually confirm the quantity and the bin they put it into. So they've disconnected the real-time validation, the accuracy part of the RF process from when the task occurred. So again, that's just introducing an opportunity for an error. With voice, what we're doing is we're keeping the eyes focused on the pick bin at all times so that we're never going to lose that eye contact. And we're also going to allow the user to be reading check digits, confirming quantities, and confirming the carton they're putting it into as they're actually doing the task. So we're just eliminating those opportunities to create errors. So now let's talk a little bit about the solution components. So we've talked about what voice is in general. We've talked about some of the operational benefits you may experience from looking at voice. But now let's take a little bit deeper dive into understanding what makes up a voice solution. And there's three main areas. You're going to look at a device to run voice on. You're going to look at a headset to listen and speak. And then you're going to look at the software portion of the solution. And we'll take a little bit to talk about each one of those areas. First, let's talk about the device. With VoCollect, they're one of the few vendors in the voice arena that gives you choices. And in particular, a choice of using a third-party device, like you see on the screen here, or a built-for-voice device. For third-party devices, VoCollect supports Intermec, Motorola, Scion, Honeywell, different models in each of their product portfolios. And I guess I could save myself a lot of time on this slide, being we are buying each other up, so Honeywell is now Honeywell and Motorola are really all that's left. However, the idea is still the same. With VoCollect, if you want to certify a voice device, these manufacturers contact VoCollect and they can put a model in for certification. And what VoCollect goes through and does is it ensures that the sound card, the processor, the memory, that device is going to be capable of delivering a user experience that would be good enough to drive productivity through the VoCollect voice solution. And that's key to understand with VoCollect is that, if you're looking at a third-party device and you're doing one of the certified devices, you can be confident that you're going to get a voice solution that's going to be the user experience you would expect. Additionally, though, VoCollect also makes the TalkBand series of devices. TalkBand series of devices are aimed at a heads-down voice operator all day. It's essentially we're going to remove the screen, we're going to remove the keyboard because this operator is going to be doing voice from the start to the end of the day. By removing that screen and the keyboard, we're going to have a more lighter, ergonomic device. We're going to have a device that's going to have fewer failures because there's less to go wrong with it. There's not a keyboard, there's not a screen. On average, a TalkBand device, you're going to see a failure maybe every 5 years instead of every 2 with a classic device. And you're typically going to see a lighter, more ergonomic approach to the user experience. For us, from Vitech standpoint, from a recommendation, we often recommend the TalkMan series if it's something where a person is going to be doing day in and day out voice operations. But if it's something where you have a cross-trained user, maybe you have a receiver that then turns around and picks in the afternoon, going with a multimodal device is a great option because you can leverage that technology across multiple systems. Outside of the device itself, though, we then have to look at the headset. The headset is what's going to deliver the audible communication in the person's ear, and also the microphone that's going to be listening to the person speaking back. Again, with Vocalec Voice, what you're going to see is you're going to see options. With 400,000 users and with thousands of DCs, they're in a lot of different environments, and they understand they need to make sure they have the right tool for the job. So if you're cold storage, you may be looking at a cupped headset or a double cupped headset to protect the user from the cold or the loud noise when they're hearing. If you're a hard hat operation, you may need a hard hat clip. We have a solution for each one of those. Additionally, we also have the SRX2, which is indicated in that lower right. And the SRX2 is a Bluetooth headset. It's an offering that just came out this year as a revision to the original SRX. And it's really kind of taking the customer base by storm because we're freeing them up from the cable. So we don't have the overhead of the cable and perhaps a case picking operation where it may get hung up. All of the headsets from Vocalec do have a noise cancellation option. So each of those microphones is going to be a two-sided microphone. It's going to listen to the world and so it can cancel that out and then listen to the operator. And that's how they're able to work in very, very noisy environments. In fact, the SRX2 in the lower right there has an additional third microphone that's located above the ear. And that's intended to help with what we would call insertions in the voice world. So it would be horn beeps or palate drops that the device may pick up as a spoken utterance. So enough about hardware. Let's talk about the software components. And with the voice solution that we're looking at for Accellos, there's really going to be four pieces to the puzzle on the software side. One is going to be Voice Console. Voice Console is the device and operator administration tool. It's essentially going to be the tool where you'll actually see device statuses, battery health indicators, and also where you can look at operators and see real-time visibility of their user dialogue. With a simple click, you can actually see the interaction between the device and the user. And you can also send real-time messages down to the users if you want. Voice Catalyst or Voice Client is the brains of the device itself. It's going to be what's running on the device and handling all of the text-to-speech, so turning the data into a spoken utterance, and also handling all the voice recognition. It's also responsible for running the voice application, which is the third component. And the voice application is actually what lines out the business logic and the dialogue flow on the device itself. And we configure that to meet the customer-specific flow. We dial it into your actual operation. And then finally, the Accellos WMS. That is going to be sitting there. It's the WMS that many of you are running today. And it's going to be talking to those voice devices via a TCP/IP socket connection. So more specifically, though, how does it work with Accellos? We talked about the hardware components of the device and the headset. We talked about the software components and those four elements. But how does it work with the Accellos WMS? And I know in attendance today, I have some of the 3PL customers from Accellos and also some of the Accellos One WMS customers. So I'll try to point out differences in the solutions. But when it comes down to integrating with any WMS, from a voice standpoint, you really have two options. You have a middleware option and then a direct option. And a middleware option is going to introduce a separate application to actually handle the voice part of the solution. In the Vocalec instance, that product is called VoiceLink. And it's a great product. We have many, many customer success stories out there utilizing VoiceLink in addition to their ERP or their WMS. However, with VoiceLink, you are introducing a new application. And along those lines, you're introducing a separate database that's going to house a separate copy of your items, your picks, and your locations. You're going to be looking at more of a batch-oriented interface where the WMS is going to allocate all the picks and then hand them off to the separate voice system to then proceed to execute on those tasks. You will introduce a separate set of screens to train your supervisors on to manage those picks, which can add time in toggling between two systems. The middleware also introduces a somewhat limiting factor on workflows. And by that I mean it's a separate system that's going to be disconnected, for example, from the real-time inventory. So let's say you are a picker and you want to introduce, as an operation, the ability for, if the bin is then empty or if the bin is going to fall below a certain threshold, you would like to ask the picker if it's empty or have them do an opportunistic cycle count. That's very difficult to do in the middleware world because I'm operating in a separate database disconnected from the real-time inventory. So again, middleware isn't necessarily a bad option in certain instances. We typically recommend middleware anytime we're walking into a legacy WMS or a batch-oriented ERP or host solution that doesn't have a direct integration option. The recommended approach, if available, is always the direct interface. And the direct interface, the device is going to talk directly to your WMS. And what that means is that you're going to have one version of the truth. We're not going to introduce an additional database, an additional copy of your picks or your items that you have to worry about syncing up between two systems. We're not going to introduce any additional management screens from a daily workflow standpoint, which can help cut down on training. And the picks are going to be retrieved real time. So just by its nature, we're going to have a 100% real-time interface where that device is going to ask Accellos WMS, what's the next thing you want me to do? And you're going to get that same instruction from that data store that's feeding both the RF and the voice device. You also get the benefit with the direct interface is that we're making Accellos voice. We can actually dial in even down to the vocabulary and the verbiage that's spoken to the user to make it very, very similar to what they're used to with the WMS. So you're not worrying about whether you're calling it an order in the WMS and an assignment in a middleware solution. So there's some key benefits with the direct interface, and that's what we've really focused on with Accellos in our partnership over the last few months is trying to bring both the WMS and the 3PL solution up into the direct interface world. On the 3PL side, they have been leveraging the direct interface, but on the WMS side, we've migrated it from a middleware approach over into a direct interface approach so we can realize those benefits. What I have here is just a graphical depiction of that direct interface in action. From a WMS standpoint, you see it down here in the lower right. And we're interacting with the device on the left here, sending back messages to the WMS to say, get the next task, confirm a pick, indicate that I'm complete with this assignment, maybe prompt for a delivery location where the person dropped it off. But all of the voice recognition and dialogue flows happening on the device side, and all of the data around the business logic, the picks, the items, the putaways, the inventory, all of that is still in that same WMS you're running today. I do have depicted here the voice console portion that we talked about. I show it on this graphic separately because it's a separate function. It's device administration and operator template management. But from a systems perspective, we don't need to introduce a new server. It can actually sit on the same Accellos server you have today, really depending on your IT preference. The workstations are serving up those same Accellos screens, be it Workspace or the older Accellos platform, on those same browser sessions you're using today. So now let's talk a little bit about real-world results. So we've talked about voice, we've talked about operational benefits, we've talked about the solution components that make up Accellos' voice offering. And now let's talk a little bit about the real-world results that people are seeing out when they actually implement the solution. And I just went through and I just picked a few names. Like I said, Vocalect has literally thousands of installs around the world. But I tried to pick some names that are representative of the industries that many of you are currently operating in. Pep Boys is the first one I chose. If you have a Pep Boys in your area, you're probably very familiar with the chain. You can see there on the quote, I don't want to necessarily read it to you, but the Pep Boys experienced some significant productivity improvements. 12% is nothing to overlook, but also a key there I think is reduction training. They cut the amount of time it takes to get a new operator by half. So any of you out there in attendance today that have either a high degree of temporary labor, seasonal labor, can relate to this, or high turnover, because imagine if then the person shows up, you can get them up to speed in half the time it's taking you today. That's how Pep Boys get their payback within 6 months of go live. Another one, for any of you in attendance today that operate in that cold storage arena. Cold storage was one of Vocolect's first success industries. Just the ergonomics of working in a freezer is very, very difficult and really kind of made for voice. Burris Logistics is one of those cold storage customers that implemented Vocolect Voice, and including in their freezer environment. And they not only saw the usual productivity increases, in their instance 25%, accuracy increases up to 99.97, but one key thing for them is they saw a dramatic drop in equipment failure rates. Because again, we're introducing into the freezer now a device with, no screen. We don't have a scanner. The person's wearing a headset, so the equipment failure rates went down drastically as well. That all helped add up to get a ROI for Burris within 10 months. London Drugs, for any of our attendees today based out of Western Canada, London Drugs is based out of British Columbia. They're a variety retailer, and you can also see their video case study on our website at viatechgroup.com. But for London Drugs, they really aimed at picking accuracy and training time reduction. Productivity was kind of a foregone conclusion from a benefit standpoint, but they saw a 70% increase in accuracy. And it's key that London Drugs, they operate a variety of different picking technologies, and they're really focused on voice for both their case pick-to-pallet and also their piece pick-to-tote operation. They've further extended this year into the restocking of those pick faces as well with a put-away function. So again, you'll start to see a common theme here of companies that are not only reporting back productivity increases, but also increases in accuracy and reduction in training time. VersaCold, another example of a cold storage customer. VersaCold Canada implemented Vocolect, and as you can see again in the quote from the VP of Operations there, that voice not only helped productivity, but also increased accuracy through focus, and also helped with safety and quality issues. So again, just 4 examples that I chose for today, and there's many, many more that I invite you to look at to find one that matches up from an industry standpoint. So hopefully you found today's presentation educational and informative. I just skimmed the surface of voice, but hopefully it got you interested enough to pursue your education further. As I mentioned a few times, our website, viatechgroup.com, is listed there in the middle. If you visit the website and you click on the Voice Solutions section, you'll see not only written case studies, but also further deep dive content on voice technology. And then most importantly, also some video case studies. So you can see actual process snippets of a person picking with voice, including one that actually does a side-by-side comparison of voice and RF so that you can kind of see the differences firsthand. From a sequence of event standpoints, if you are interested in voice technology, please reach out to either your Accellos representative. I also, for just convenience, I listed out both my contact information and Ashley's contact information. If you have any questions or follow-up, we're both available. But from a standpoint of next steps, we'll also look to work with the Accellos team and the Viatech team to schedule a discovery call with you. We'll walk through your operation, and we'll also look to schedule a time to get out there and see your operation firsthand and do a voice assessment where we'll actually go out on the floor. We'll observe the workflow firsthand so that we can give you an idea of where we see the savings, what the processes are going to be that are a good fit for voice, and really try to document where we see that payback coming so that you can confidently look at it. And Ashley, at this point, I'll hand it back over to you for maybe a couple of questions, and then we'll wrap up. And as we mentioned, please send any follow-up questions that we're unable to get to Ashley.
Thanks so much, Richard. I do have a couple questions coming in, and the first one that hopefully you can take care of is, how does the voice solution address the different languages spoken in our warehouse?
That's a great question, very, very common question when people are looking at voice. With Vocolect Voice, we utilize what we call a speaker-dependent model with adaptation. And so what that means is that we can be fairly agnostic as to what language the operator is speaking to the device. We actually go through a 15-minute training session the first time a user uses voice, and we'll memorize how they say each of the words they're going to be speaking. we then continue to adapt to that person over time. So through that, we're able to eliminate any problems with different languages or different dialects that may be spoken within a single warehouse. Accents are also not an issue. Then as far as the operator listening to the device, VocaLect has up to 42 different languages that can be listened to from the device as well.
Great. One more question here. Can we use RF scanning alongside voice in our DC, or does it replace it entirely?
Another fantastic question, and there's really two answers to that question. First, from a general RF gun versus VocaLect voice device, there's nothing that says you have to do a full cut over to voice, especially with a direct interface model like Accellos. You can actually have a voice operator working side by side with an RF operator because, again, it's the same database, so we're not worried about keeping two things in sync. So an operator actually could start to pick an order with voice, sign off, and then pass that over to a RF operator that could scan back onto that same container and then finish it with RF. So from that standpoint, it definitely doesn't have to be a wholesale replacement. The second answer to the question, though, if you were intending to ask, can I still scan? What if I have serial numbers? What if I have lot numbers that are hard to speak? Voice does not necessarily mean that there's zero scanning. We actually have the ability to work with the scanner on the third-party device or a Bluetooth scanner with the TalkMan device, so that if we do have elements that we need to capture that are not voice-friendly, you can still leverage that scanner occasionally when you need to.
Fantastic. And I think we have time just for one more question. It looks like a quick one. How long does it usually take to archive ROI with voice?
To achieve ROI with voice?
Yeah.
That one does vary, so I hate to end with a vague answer, but ROI, we're going to aim with voice at usually 12 months or less. And that's kind of based on the experience of a variety of customers in a variety of industries. The ROI, though, is important to frame up case by case, and that's why we follow that discovery call and DC walkthrough steps, because we want to make sure that you are walking into your voice project with an accurate expectation of what that payback is going to look like. It varies a lot of times because what is the customer starting with, where we're going to with voice, but also how much travel time may be involved in your process. What are the elements that voice isn't going to be able to address so that we don't set a false expectation and present a false expectation to management? So the ROI question, the answer is it does vary, but it varies typically in that 6 to 12 month window for a customer, depending on the industry and the environment we're putting voice into.
All right, great. I do want to thank you and everyone else on the line for being available today to take part in the webinar. There are other questions that we haven't been able to ask today, but we did go over the time that we said that we had allotted. So I will make sure that these questions get sent to the appropriate reps and that everyone is contacted back with their answers as soon as possible. Thank you so much for presenting, Richard.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and thank you everybody for attending today. I look forward to exploring voice further with each and every one of you.
Great. Have a great day.